Thank you. I will now declare open this fifth public hearing for the Senate Environment Communications Reference Committee's inquiry into 000 service outages. I begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land upon which we meet and pay our respects to their elders past and present, extend that respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here today. These are public proceedings being video live streamed via the Parliament House website, and a Hansard transcript is being made. If there's no objection, of course, for those, if there's any media in the room, they will be able to participate and record the proceedings. I remind all witnesses that in giving evidence to the committee, they are protected by parliamentary privilege. It's unlawful for anyone to threaten or disadvantage a witness on account of evidence given to a committee, and any such action may be treated as contempt by the Senate. It is also contempt to give false or misleading evidence. The committee generally prefers evidence to be given in public, but under the Senate's resolutions, witnesses do have the right to be held in private session, and sometimes the committee will insist that we are held in private session. If a witness objects to answering a question, they should state the ground upon which the objection is made, and the committee will determine whether it will insist on an answer, having regard to the ground upon which it is claimed. If the committee determines to insist on an answer, a witness may request that answer be given in camera. I remind senators of their obligations under the Behaviour Code for Australian parliamentarians to treat witnesses with dignity, courtesy, fairness and respect. Answers to questions on notice are due Thursday the 2nd of April, that's next Thursday, and I now welcome representatives from the Department of Infrastructure, Transport, Regional Development, Communications, Sports and the Arts. I understand that information on parliamentary privilege, protection of witnesses, giving evidence to Senate committees has been provided to you. You've both been through this process numerous times. And I remind my fellow senators around the rules of how we have to deal with departments, officers of the departments of the Commonwealth, not being asked to give opinions on matters of policy, and shall be given reasonable opportunity to refer their questions of the officer to superior officers or to a minister. Of course, this resolution only prohibits asking questions of opinions on matters of policies, does not preclude asking questions for examples of policies or factual questions about when and how policies were adopted. Officers are reminded about the rules in relation to the public interest and making a public interest immunity claim. A copy of the Senate order in relation to those is available. I now invite you to give us an opening statement if you have one, and then we'll go to some questions. And apologies for the delay. Question time ran over.
Thank you, Chair. No opening statement from the department. Okay,
all right. Well, we might go straight to questions then. I think I might kick off. I know I'll have colleagues that have other questions. Obviously, since we've had you before us in this particular hearing, particular inquiry before, the government has now announced the review into the 000 review. I'm interested as to when the decision was made to conduct a review into the 000 system.
So Senator Claire Chappell, First Assistant Secretary, 000 Custodian Division. So the decision, the Richard Bean review, a recommendation 18 was in relation to this review, the legislative and regulatory review of settings surrounding 000, and in the government's response to that report, they agreed to conduct the review.
So the Bean report a number of years ago recommended a review into 000, but it's taken till now.
Yes. So as part of forming the report, Mr. Bean, 18 recommendations recommended that there was time to implement the first 17 to determine, to put in place changes and changes quickly, and then at that point it would be the right time to look into the review, to initiate the review.
Mm-hmm. And when was the first terms of reference drafted for the review?
I would have to get back to you with a date, Senator, but certainly we were working on drafting terms of reference from the beginning of this year.
Okay. And can you explain to me who is going to actually run the review?
Yes, it will be the 000 custodian.
So that's yourself, Ms Chappell?
Yes, my division.
Your division?
Yeah.
And have you been given any extra resources, or is there anything that's been given or allocated to your division in order to complete this review?
I have an existing team of policy experts and they'll be the ones conducting it, so no additional resources.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And you've got 12 months to complete it?
That's correct.
Yeah. Obviously, there's a number of various pieces of legislation. There's been a number of inquiries. Is there anything in addition that you will be needing to source in order for you to do this review, do you think?
Yes, I think, obviously, as you say, there's a lot of literature out there, and so not trying to replicate any of those processes and drawing that information where it exists. We'd be looking, and we still need to formalise with the agreement of the Minister our consultation plan, but we'd be looking to have targeted consultation with key stakeholders and also an element of public consultation, and I'm particularly interested in getting the views of stakeholders and organisations that are adjacent to the system that aren't necessarily part of that stakeholder
Can you
group.
Unpack that a bit for me?
Yeah,
Who do you mean?
So we might be looking at particular disability groups or vendors that are looking at future solutions to how 000 could operate. Right. They may have really worthwhile contributions.
Okay, so for example, the Starlink type satellite.
Yeah.
Example that our committee looked at a number of weeks ago. Thank you. And in terms of the public, what would that constitute in terms of some of the public engagement?
Again, I think I don't kind of want to speak ahead of sort of resolving that, but I imagine there'll be a period of submissions.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So at some point you'll open submissions formally. Members of the public.
Yeah,
community organisations will be able to feed in.
That's the current intention.
Obviously there's the key consumer group in this space, ACAN. You'll be looking to engage with them.
Yes.
And have you seen this, the ACAN consumer sentiment tracker survey?
I have, Senator. Yes, I also spoke to ACAN about it late last week.
Mm-hmm. And are you surprised by any of these findings?
Yes, well, when I first saw the media release, I think that came out just before the last hearing, I saw sort of the headline figure of 1 in 10 Australians not able to connect to 000, which was incredibly concerning. I then followed up with ACAN to see if we could access some of the data that sat behind that, just to sort of understand it, and then met face-to-face. Well, not face-to-face, it was virtual. And as part of those conversations, I think ACAN were then clear that the data represents 1 in 10 survey respondents, as opposed to extrapolating that out to 1 in 10 Australians.
Like any survey does.
Of course.
That's how surveys work. You can't, unless it's a plebiscite or a referendum.
Yes, although there are, as I understand it, ways of constructing surveys to be more representative, to give you more confidence.
But this was a reputable survey company, wasn't it?
I believe so, yes. But yes. we have requested a more detailed, and indeed ACAN have offered a more detailed briefing, if you like, into those findings, which I'm looking forward to.
Because 1 in 10 people not being able to get through on 000 is very concerning.
Incredibly concerning.
Is there any other data that is available beyond, this consumer sentiment tracker?
So we require Telstra, as part of their contract for the emergency call person, to report to us on how many calls have gone through, what's the wait time to transfer to emergency service organisations, so we can see that. And we also have information that is provided to us from telcos about the number of emergency calls. We are initiating a piece of work at the moment that will establish some performance reporting, I suppose, if you like, for each of the telcos that will give us some baseline, how many calls, how many transferred through, how many welfare checks conducted, that sort of thing.
So You've asked Telstra, I mean, and the reason it's Telstra is because they're the ones who have the contract to
Correct.
take the call,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Regardless of who the customer's provider
Yes.
is. So do you have do you know in the last 12 months how many calls
Yes.
were made to 000 and failed?
Well, I don't know about failed. I can say, so in 2025, there were 14.6 million calls to 000. 11.7 of them were answered, and I'll give you some more detail about the difference between those two figures. And then 9 million of them, of those 11.7 million, were transferred to state and territory emergency service organisations. The difference between the 4.6 and the 11.7 is not failed calls. It might be a pocket dial. It might be, a number of very legitimate reasons why that hasn't transferred through.
But you don't know the percentage of that difference.
I would need to check that and just see the level of granularity we've got in that reporting. Yes, there are distinctions. Telstra uses language about ungraceful and graceful dropping of calls, and so a graceful would, and it's strange language, I think, but graceful is where it's that pocket dial or it's that unintentional. Someone didn't want to get through to 000 and so therefore the call has been disconnected. The ungraceful is where someone has intended to get through and for other reasons they haven't, and they're the ones that we're worried about because that indicates system failure somewhere.
And so successful calls through to 000 was in whatever description of successful, but were connected.
Yes.
So successfully connected to emergency services.
To the emergency, yes.
I think that's the clearest definition, isn't it? That was 11.7 million.
No, that's just over 9 million that went through to emergency service
9 million.
organisations.
Yep.
9 million that went through. So what's the difference between 11.7 and 9 million?
So you've picked up and the emergency call person has said police, fire or ambulance. At that point, someone might say, actually, no, I don't want that number, or...
Right.
So
then there's another drop-off.
Yes.
And that, again, is gracefully...
Correct.
That's a definition of gracefully. So really what we don't know is the difference, the percentage of the calls between the 14.6 million and the 11.7, and how many of them just fail.
I don't, with me right now, have the breakdown. We do have a pretty good indication of the kinds of reasons why they drop off, but I don't have that detailed breakdown. I can
But Telstra needs to tell you...
Yes.
...if a call fails to go through. I mean, that is the requirement under the law.
Yes, that's correct.
So how many calls do they log or inform you or report that fail to go through?
So they have a requirement, a contractual requirement to meet certain performance standards. I think... I just need to be careful because there are certain points at the system where the call can fail. And by and large, and the ones that we've seen that have been involved in kind of recent outages have actually been before they get to Telstra as the emergency call person. So I just I want a chance to be
because they've got the 30-second delay and they don't, or it just goes dead. It's just dead.
For whatever technical reason, it hasn't gotten through, and that won't even hit the emergency call person as a stat. So I really would like a chance to be able to interrogate.
I guess the reason I'm trying to drill down on this is because the only data that we have been given as a committee is this data from ACAN.
Yeah.
Right? Which says 1 in 10 survey respondents have reported that their calls have not connected through, that they've had problems getting through to 000. So, and I understand that there's, I get that the big telecommunications companies won't be happy to see these figures being bantied around. I get that. But in the absence of any other data, what's the committee meant to do with this?
So, Chair, the numbers that Ms Chappell ran through that we've already discussed are in our supplementary submission. So we have provided that level of data, and we will come back on notice with the additional questions that you have raised.
Okay.
And I think the, and point taken around that being a source, the ACAN survey, but what it will not tell you is if, where in the system that problem occurs.
Yes, I understand that. I understand that. I guess that's important from a technical perspective and a procedure perspective to understand, but from a consumer, someone trying to call 000, they don't care whether it's because their Samsung phone doesn't connect or Optus has an outage or, they've driven into a black spot. They're trying to call 000 and they can't get through.
I understand.
Okay. Could I ask where the ACMA investigation into the entire 000 Optus fiasco is up to?
Chair, I think that's probably a question for ACMA.
Yes. So you haven't seen it?
No, Senator.
Well, how are you assisting ACMA in their inquiry?
If they came to us requesting information, we would, of course, provide it.
So have they done so?
I would need to check, Senator.
I would have thought as the triple custodian you would know whether the regulator had approached the department about the 000 inquiry.
About their investigation
That's
into
right.
the Optus outage. I mean, we talk incredibly regularly to ACMA,
Right.
and we have a good flow of information regardless.
Okay, so what
but I would
can you-
need to check if they had specifically and formally requested information.
Well,
aid
I'm
their
not worried
inquiry.
about whether it's formal or informal. What information has ACMA requested from the department in relation to its inquiry into the 000 outages?
Senator, we have shared the information that we have that is relevant to the outage.
All right,
with
could we
ACMA.
please have a copy of that on notice?
Certainly. I believe most of the documentation will have already been provided to this committee, but we can certainly check if there's anything
Thank you. To the
outstanding.
extent that we haven't received documents, if you could just share those documents with the committee. Sorry,
No, that's
sorry,
fine.
Chair.
That's fine. But what I'm trying to... so we've been told by the ACMA that their investigation is been undertaken. We're waiting for the report. We had them in front of us 2 weeks ago. It's, this outage happened and these deaths occurred in September, October, November, December, January, February, March. We're 6 months down the track and we haven't got anything back from the key regulator. And what I'm hearing is that neither has the department. I just want to make sure that's my understanding is correct, that the regulator 6 months later hasn't even handed anything to the department about the 000 outage.
Not to my knowledge, Senator.
No, we haven't seen. But that would be a matter for ACMA to progress.
I understand that. Would you expect to see the report from ACMA before the minister, at the same time as the minister, after the minister?
I think in general, Senator, when we're talking about the activities of an independent regulator, we would expect to see it at the same time. But that is a general comment.
Okay. Is there any work being done by the department as to whether the regulator is fit for purpose?
No, Senator, there's no work underway at present on that question.
Is there any work underway around the structure of ACMA?
I think the structure of an independent entity is really a question for that authority, not for the department.
But I mean, if they're not up to the job, it's the government's. The government needs to do something about it. So what I'm trying to understand is there any work being done in the department? Are there any questions being asked within the department or the government about what on earth is going on with the regulator? Because the regulator seems to be failing at every post at this point.
I think Ms Chappell has said in specific reference to the 000 matter, there's a good ongoing engagement between her team in the custodian function and ACMA. But I don't think beyond that I have anything else to add to my previous answer, Chair.
Yes.
Your answer was very specific. There's no current work being done. Has there been work done in the previous 6 months?
I would need to take that on notice, Senator.
Is there any work being done as to the role that the regulator plays in relation to these matters?
In relation to 000
Yep.
matters, I think that'll be one of the things that the review that we were discussing earlier will cover. That is intended to look at the full range of legislation, other structures around 000. So I think that will
Including
be
including the regulator themselves.
No, the scope doesn't look to the regulator or its structure, but it certainly looks to the regulatory
operation of the system,
framework,
yeah.
correct.
Okay. Is there any discussions happening within the department or between the department and the Minister's office in relation to any other roles or responsibilities of ACMA?
outside 000.
Yes.
I will take that on notice, Chair.
Thank you. When does the current chair position expire for the ACMA?
I'll need to confirm that on notice, Chair. I don't have that in my head.
And is there any work being done to replace the chair?
As an ordinary matter of business, we monitor all board appointments in all portfolio entities. I have taken on notice the question of when the current chair's term expires, but it would be usual for teams in the department to be doing preparatory work in anticipation of a term coming up. So I'm confident that the answer to your question is yes, but that would be ordinary practice for all of the
Yes.
entities that we have responsibility for.
Okay, understood. Yes? Do you want to go?
I've got some questions. But I can wait till
Yes. No, well, you guys go and then we'll come back. Yep.
She's got to go for it. There was some, in our first hearing, we were talking about the email address and the monitoring of the email address for the complaint. What email address was that they originally sent to, the complaint? Was that to you or was that to ACMA, the notification of the outage?
It was a departmental email
Okay.
address. Yeah.
Is that email address still active now?
I don't believe so, Senator. We have a separate mailbox. We have a separate process and system that has been set up.
A telco has told me they received notification late last year that the original email address that you said was not to be sent to was updated by your department that in fact it is active and it is for lower tier faults. Is that not true?
Senator, I would need to confirm that specific claim, but we do not use that for 000 notifications. We have it. You go.
From memory, Senator, and we will confirm, as Ms Chappell has said, on notice.
It was all telcos that I think were notified to continue using that email address.
I understand, and I'm going from memory. This predates my time in this role.
Yep.
But my recollection is that some of our earlier evidence was that we had gone from, if you like, a mailbox being used for a number of purposes to separating out an address specifically for outages of this nature. So I think we had already covered in earlier evidence that the original mailbox in question did have an ongoing purpose. But we will,
I think that's
we will
right for
confirm it
natural
on notice.
disasters,
Yeah,
for
we will
example,
confirm
but
on
we'll
notice.
confirm that.
Okay, and I have to correct something. I did say telco. I was telco consultant, so I have to withdraw something a little I said on that one. I would like to know, and a copy, if given the communication to the telcos, if one does exist from late last year, that the mailbox use is still in thing. And then, because what was put to me is the initial failure of this note wouldn't have reached the scope. It should have gone to that email address under the new definitions.
we will come back to you on that on notice.
So what I'd really like to know is, under the current definitions, would the first failure still go to that email address, and how is that monitored is the right thing to ask.
Right, yeah, we will come back on all of that on notice.
When we go forward, and there's been a change of personalities here, and all the stats and all the numbers, and we talk about the numbers from that survey, and that's what we've gone on. I've seen the data you put on the point lately. different technologies. We've had Starlink here this week talking about spectrums and the 2 megahertz spectrum and these sorts of things and the on-ramping and stuff. What work are you doing to look at emerging technologies where we're talking about VoIP, where we're talking about all these things and their integration to 000? Because it's great to find out what happened this time. What are we doing as a department to make sure we're looking at things in the future?
Yeah, absolutely, Senator, and I agree. Look, I think an aspect of the legislative and regulatory review will be looking forward to what technologies are coming. Have we got a system that is fit for purpose now, but also in that future where there are new technologies? And the current environment is written to preface voice. So, that is something that we need to look at. But the Minister made a speech late last month where she was talking about 000 being able to respond. Consumers should be able to access 000 with the technology that they're using. And so I think that really sets a roadmap for us to be looking forward to what the future of 000 looks like. So we're commencing that work. I think the regulatory and legislative settings are the right place to start. But we're also doing a lot of work with our emergency services colleagues and international partners too to understand how they're coming at this. We are not alone, we're a technology taker as well. So that kind of deep research to see what else is out there and what other solutions.
So do we have a timetable for, it's always moving, I get that it's always moving. I just see, my concern is obviously the MSS spectrum, the 2 gig MSS, I think the reallocation of that is potentially going to auction or otherwise, that last thing. How do we use that for national good? What are we linked? Is that going to a provider? Is that being looked at that level, or is that a process that's being done separately?
Senator, I'm not sure specifically what the 000 kind of connection would be there.
Because Inmarsat's got such a big spectrum in that area. Satellite is everywhere. Looking at the outdoor mobile obligation, that integration of everything is. Yeah.
I think that was where I was going to go next. Is the intersection then between the design and operation of the 000 system and the universal outdoor mobile obligation. Bill is before the Parliament at present, and that is a big part of our thinking about what future evolution of 000 will look like.
Right. When we had Optus here, and obviously I noticed a change in tone from the first, when we were here 18 months ago, 2 years ago now, I think in the first one. They are progressing along their pathway of change. What role do you have in, if any, in checking that out? Because it's great that they come here and say that they're on this pathway of change, that they've seen these things, they're reporting culture, they're onshoring these calls. Do you have a role to play in that? Is there a body, ACMA or you, that other than that are like checking their homework?
Yeah, I mean, our role is to monitor and improve the ecosystem, and Optus is a key part of that. They are very public about what they're progressing against the review that Dr. Schott conducted, and certainly we will be asking them for how they're progressing against that. But a lot of the things that report goes to are also relevant for other telcos, and so we are really interested in early warnings and system identification, what information telcos see, how they report that to us, and testing of systems and devices. So the short answer is yes, specifically for what they've committed to do, but also our core role is to make sure that each of the telcos are making those step changes.
Something that came to me, and again, another consultant, so I'm relying on other information, but our job is to pursue this, is the number of handsets that were put up as non-compliant in the weeks and months after this significantly increased. Potentially that the process wasn't working to proactively get these, everyone caught up in how are we going. Was that true, and what are we doing to try and stop that happening again? I
think what we're seeing is the system of testing becoming something commonplace. That is a requirement that telcos are required to do. We have facilitated that through working and partnering with UTS to set up a testing facility. And so some of that handset activity you were seeing was in relation to the test that had been conducted, and telcos and handset operators working together to try and address those issues, which is exactly what I would expect to see. There will be cases where things are really tricky to fix, and so then we have to look at what regulatory actions might come to bear to be able to deal with those handsets. But yes, I would expect we are entering a period of telcos and handset operators identifying problems and working to fix them.
Could be interesting. is it 100% of handsets that are being tested, or we'll never get to that standard that are on the market?
I think it would be very tricky to test 100% of handsets. No sooner have you got there than there's more ones that come onto the market, but we will focus on, common handsets.
Do you need a...
I'm okay. Do you have to go?
Or I might not just call Cora, I might just give that back for a second.
Just you go.
Yeah.
That's fine. Sorry to change tact. Could I ask, we were talking about the figures in relation to how many calls, and you've taken that on notice. I'm interested as to how the contract with Telstra works.
This is the emergency call person
yes,
contract?
the emergency call person. Is that a contract that the Commonwealth has with Telstra that's, how long is that contract for? How regularly is it reviewed? I want to understand that part of this whole
certainly.
equation.
I might call my colleague Mr. McGowan up to the table, if that's okay.
Thank you.
He's got his little... So certainly the current contract with Telstra, and Mr. McGowan will correct me if I'm wrong, runs through to 2032?
That's correct.
That's correct. And when did that come?
So my name's Kevin McGowan. I'm Acting Assistant Secretary in the Custodian Operations Branch. So Senator, the Telstra Universal Services Operation Performance Agreement, as it's called, the TUSOPA for short, commenced in 2012, and it's a 20-year period, runs through to 2032.
It's a 20-year contract.
Correct.
Through to 2032. And is there review periods in that, or has it just been the contract's done and it's only when things like this happen that...
No, there are provisions in Module A of the TUSOPA. There's a number of different modules. So there is provision for review, and I believe one was undertaken a few years back, but I'd have to check when that was.
Could you? Yep. Perhaps just to be really clear, it'd be good to know how many reviews have occurred with this contract since 2012 and when they were, and whether that did that result in any alteration of the contract?
We'll take that on notice, Chair.
Take that on notice.
Yeah.
And who would normally conduct that type of, review or provision under the Model A, as you say?
Under Module A? Well, it would depend. Modules B, C, D and E are all different subject matter. Module E is the emergency call service component. That's the part that we look after. Modules B and C, B relates to the standard telephone service and C relates to the payphones. Module D relates to a former migration program that was set up when NBN commenced to migrate people onto what was called the voice-only migration project. So it would depend on who in the department was looking after the particular module that was being reviewed.
Okay.
And what it was being reviewed for.
Yeah,
and what it was.
So we can probably, in that question notice, we can have a look at who undertook the review.
Yes, that would be helpful, thank you. But it's Module E that is specifically related
emergency
to...
call service is Module E, so that's 000 in common language. Yep.
Yes, okay. And is there a particular currency or value amount attached to Module E?
There's an annual invoice that Telstra puts in for operating the emergency call service, the emergency call person, and that's capped at $20 million per annum.
It's $20 million per annum capped.
Yes.
And does it always reach its cap?
No, not always, but there's also provision under Module E for upgrade work to be done on the platform or delivery of the service, and that figure is outside of the cap.
Okay. In addition?
Yeah.
Yes.
So that they can apply to us if they're undertaking a major capital expenditure
Yes.
to go above the 20 million.
To improve
Yeah.
the service.
And so it's capped at 20 million. Is that because it's based on the number of calls they have to that come in over the year? Is that what the invoice is based on, or?
When the contract was set up, I've got no idea what the basis for that was, Senator, for the capping at that particular figure.
No, okay, but that's not my question.
Oh,
like
sorry.
when you get the invoice, when you
Yep.
send the invoice out to
Yep.
Telstra,
Yep.
to determine how much it is it 19 million?
What causes it to change?
What causes it to change, exactly?
So that's based on an assessment of the costs that Telstra presents annually. We go through those costs.
Okay.
So there would be an element which would involve the number of calls if you'd seen, a
Yes.
massive spike, but that might not be the only factor.
No, that would be
For-
part of the cost.
For interest, I mean, I'm sorry if this information is already public, but we haven't got to this level of detail in this committee yet. So, and today is the right day to do it. Could we have a copy of, last year's invoice, or maybe the last 5 years' invoice?
We'll check and take that on notice, Senator. To the extent, and we may just need to check kind of contractually, but yes, we will share.
We're trying to understand,
Yeah.
what makes this up.
Yes.
Understood.
And I guess what I'd also like to understand, I mean, if it's capped at 20 million 20 years ago, is that, there's been no CPI with that, or?
No, there's no CPI clause written into the module
Okay.
for annual increases. It's just capped and, it varies from year to year subject to the costs that Telstra incurs.
How I'm keen to know. Look, could we take last financial year? Did it reach 20 million?
Yes, it did.
And was there anything in addition outside that was requested from Telstra to be paid for?
As in...
On top of the 20.
Supplementary?
So upgrade proposals, there's a number of upgrade proposals that are in progress.
Yeah.
Okay. And can I have some understanding as to what they are?
So there's specific projects that they're undertaking around network resilience and redundancies. There's some costs associated with those projects. So there's about, I think, 2 or 3 of those, and there's some smaller ones, but I could get you a list of all of the upgrade proposals.
That would be helpful, and the dollar figures,
Yes.
please. Because what I'm trying to understand is if it's been capped at 20 million for the last, whatever that is, 14 years, how then is this are these additional invoices coming through or requests coming through because that 20 million isn't actually dealing with the cost? Is there a shortfall?
Yeah, we will give you the information to be able to make that assessment, Senator. I think because of the nature of the capping and that these additional items must be expenditure or enhancements as opposed to topping up what might be setting a floor, I think the answer is no, but we will get that done.
I'm just trying to work out if there's some cost shifting going on or, offsetting happening.
Yeah, it's not designed to cover BAU, and we are in the process of assessing those. So it's not a given that they get approved. They come to us and we assess them to determine whether or not we would pay them over and above the 20 million.
I think you said that last year the number of calls that they received or that they connected through was 9 million.
11.7 were answered by
11.7 were
emergency
answered.
called person, and just over 9 million were transferred to emergency services.
Okay, so 11.7 million calls were answered, and
9 of those, 9 million were
9 million
transferred
of them were connected, and Telstra got paid $20 million.
thereabouts, yes.
Okay, so I guess there's once we see those invoices, we can work out a bit more how much per call Telstra's being paid.
I think we've taken on notice the question of what the makeup of the invoice amount is. I think Ms Chappell did say it's unlikely it will simply be a function of call volume.
Yes.
And Telstra is required to set up a certain level of service regardless of how many calls they get, whether that's less or more, right? The capacity needs to be there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I understand. Is there a current review being done in relation to Module E?
Not in relation to the whole contract. We are, as we said, reviewing the additional requests that have come through for expenditure, so not currently.
Okay. And has Telstra ever requested or asked for that 20 million cap to be reassessed?
Yes.
They have?
They have.
Yeah.
We're currently doing that right now. The most recent financial year, the figure proposed by Telstra exceeds the cap, and our team's going through a process now of validating those costs to assess whether it's a reasonable request from Telstra.
Okay. And how often have we paid in excess of the cap?
I think we'll give that to you in our answer on notice. Yeah.
What was the excess for the cap last year?
It was somewhere between 1.5 or 2 million at first cut. But when I say at first cut, there's been some backwards and forwards between the team, and some of the costs have been adjusted. So I'd have to get the exact figure to answer that question for you.
And when you say there's currently a request from Telstra to exceed the cap, is that's for the 2025-2026 financial year?
Yeah, and Telstra's indicated that they may exceed the cap going forward.
Okay. And what's their reason for that?
I think, as you indicated earlier, Senator, the contract is, some years old now, and costs you would expect have gone up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When is there any work being done within the department to consider reviewing the full contract prior to, its exhaustion in 2032?
I think early stages work, Chair. We will do a thorough review, and some of the issues that I was talking about with Senator Cadell in terms of what a future 000 could look like and future technologies, I think will be part of that thinking. So early work, but yes, we would look to be well ahead of the end of that contract date.
Okay. Well, I really I look forward to seeing some of those details. If we can get some copies of what it is, then that would be very, very helpful. Could you tell me that in 2012, when this contract was first done, did it go to auction, or what was the purpose for it being given to Telstra? What was the process there?
Well, I believe.
I know it's a long time ago.
I don't really know for sure, Senator.
We'll confirm.
We'll confirm on notice. Yes.
Is there in the preliminary work that's being done? Is this being discussed? Is there just an expectation that it'll be rolled over with Telstra, or is there an expectation that you'd go to tender?
My expectation is that we need to better understand and scope what we expect a future 000 landscape to look like, and whether the service offering continues to be an emergency call service with a call centre and a person answering the call, or whether we are now looking at something that is different, and I think that will then inform the approach that's taken forward. I think it would be too early to speculate on who could possibly provide that service.
Yeah.
And that's right. We wouldn't normally choose a procurement approach first. We'd do the work that Ms Chappell just described first.
Yes. Is there any consideration of making sure that this is done as most essential services are via the government rather than being outsourced?
I think, you know, as we said, we will need first to go to the question of what is it that we need to deliver for this service, and then determine who's best to deliver that.
Mm. But it is an essential service, isn't it?
It's a public safety service, yes.
Yeah. Okay. I may have some... We'll see what Senator Henderson comes up with. Your shot. Oh,
thank you, Chair.
Senator Walker. No, okay.
Good afternoon to you all again. Look, I just wanted to ask about texting to 000 capability. Why don't we have that capability in this country?
So, Senator, the legislation and regulation currently deals with voice communications to 000. And so certainly as part of the review that the Minister's initiated, you know, and as we were talking about with Senator Cadell, we would expect to be looking at what the future landscape looks like, including text, but, you know, legislative change would be the first part of it, or regulatory change. I think the other kind of important aspect is how SMS performs and how it is prioritised on the network, and whether, you know, it can provide the right kind of service in a time-critical emergency.
This is a technology available in numerous other countries.
Why
has the government sat on its hands on text to 000 capability? And this is not rocket science. It's available, as I say, in a number of other countries.
So we are currently in the market procuring a trial for SMS relay to 000. That is, I think, a first important step in examining the technology and how it performs.
So are you differentiating between texting to 000 and relay? Could you just explain?
Correct. So under a relay model, the caller would text into a call centre, and then that call centre would voice call and take carriage of that kind of all the way through to the emergency call person, as opposed to you texting an emergency number and the emergency number texting back.
And so, yes, I understand about the trial, but this proposal, there's been various proposals before government. I appreciate that you're not the decision makers in terms of the policy, but have you made any recommendations to the government in relation to text to messaging capability?
I haven't made any recommendations.
Sorry, has the department?
We would need to check historically whether any advice has been put to ministers before we've been in our roles. Certainly the minister is aware of the trial, and, you know, it is also aware of the opportunities through the legislative and regulatory review. But I haven't provided any, or we have not, over the last 6 months, say, provided any briefing on SMS to 000.
Are you able to provide on notice the submissions to either the department or the minister in relation to text to messaging, texting to 000 capability, please, including in relation to the trial?
So, Senator, can I just clarify the question? When you say submissions...
Well, any submissions the department has received or the minister has received, and all correspondence in relation to texting to 000 capability.
I think the only challenging part of that will be in relation to the procurement that is on foot right now. We'll just need to consider the status of that procurement, but I understand the question. We'll take that on notice.
If there are any commercial in confidence matters within that procurement, you can certainly seek to...
We will take that on notice.
You know,
I just wanted to flag that in advance.
Bring back your case for redaction, but I guess, you know, the capability is there. It's been available in many other parts of the world. I am just wondering why this is such an issue in this country.
I suppose, Senator, an important point is it's not just the Telstra/000 part that needs to be capable of receiving text messages. If we're talking about a device to a device, it's also the state and territory emergency service organisations that need to be capable.
Of course.
And so that's a much bigger and more complex picture than just it being 000. And that is why the relay, I think, has been kind of the first port of call for a trial, because it doesn't mean 3 times every jurisdiction having to upgrade their technology. So it is quite a big and complex picture to roll out any new technology to 000.
All right, well, if we could have, as I say, all submissions that either the department has or the Minister's office, any briefing papers or any other advices and correspondence in relation to this issue, we'd be really grateful, including the current trial. Because at the end of the day, what concerns me is that if this is part of the review, we've already had a 2-year delay with the review. That review was recommended 2 years ago. Are you able to shed any light as to why the government took so long and the minister took so long to make a decision to implement that recommendation? That's recommendation 18 of the Bean Review, and to implement a full review of the 000 ecosystem. It just seems extraordinary to me that even after last September, the minister sat on her hands and did not recognise the importance of this review.
Senator, I think we covered this at the start of today's hearing, but the intention, including by Mr Bean himself, was that the first 17 recommendations of the review would be complete before recommendation 18 commenced. We've been talking today about some of the complexities of what that looks like, and this year we are at the point now where that is the case. Those recommendations.
Sorry,
have
can
been
you
complete.
just point me to the report? So, are you suggesting that the Bean Review recommended that a review should not start for 2 years? I am absolutely certain that was not what he was saying.
The intention at the time was that those recommendations get implemented, and that the last thing, once that was the case and those changes had been implemented, that what was left would then be reviewed through this process, which is now what.
So I don't accept that. I don't accept that the Bean Review was ever foreseeing that a review of the 000 regulatory framework would commence 2 years after he made that recommendation. So can you point me to the part of the report that says that?
I would need to check, Senator. I can certainly have a look. But in its response, the government itself indicated that the intention was to deliver the other 17 recommendations, and some of those are for industry to deliver as well. And once they were complete, that the review would be initiated.
Look, I know you're not. We haven't got a representative of the minister here today, so you're not. I'm not asking you to speak for the minister, but the minister had every opportunity prior to September, but certainly after this catastrophic outage, to announce the review. I mean, we saw some improvements to 000 regulations announced or put into place on the 1st of April 2025, including a mandatory notification to emergency services. That took 6 months to be implemented. Those enhanced regulations were not implemented until the 1st of November 2025. Now, we've heard on evidence that was a decision of the minister. So I'm wondering whether did the department make any recommendations that the minister should announce this review at an earlier point in time? Was there any discussions or recommendations to the minister?
I don't believe so, Senator, but if that's not the case, we'll take it on notice.
Okay, so at no time did you raise with the minister that she should be implementing a review of the 000 ecosystem? I mean, we know how deeply flawed it is. We know right now there are Australians, after the botched 3G shutdown, who still cannot get a 000 connection. So are you saying that at no time did the department reiterate to the minister that a review of the 000 regulatory framework should be implemented?
No, Senator, I don't believe that's what I'm saying. I've committed to take on notice whether the department recommended that a review should be initiated at a point in time, but there would have been briefing around the government response to the recommendations that detailed how they should go forward and the implementation pathway. So I don't think it would be a correct characterisation to say the department didn't put any advice forward.
I'm not characterising it. I'm asking you a question. Is it the case? Is it the case that did the department not make any recommendation or remind the minister that this was a critical part of the Bean review recommendations?
We will take that on notice, Senator.
Could we have, as a committee, all correspondence in relation to the Bean review recommendations from the 1st of July last year, including any advices or briefs between the department and the Minister's office, please?
We'll take that on notice, Senator.
Yes, if you could take that on notice. Thank you. Chair, I don't have any other questions right at the moment, but I may have a few more.
Well, we're actually over time now.
Yes, I know we are.
So I think what we will do is leave our questions for you here for today. We've put quite a bit on notice. We may have follow-ups given you're the department. And just underscoring again, and for those from the regulator who will be reading and watching this, we are still waiting for their investigation report, and it's becoming very frustrating that we haven't got that. So once we get that, we may need to get you back.
And Chair, could I know I have asked for a range of documents on behalf of the committee, but can I just reiterate how important it is that there's full compliance with my request, so that we've got a very big job to do, and I am concerned that a 12-month timeline before there's a report. I don't understate how complex the job is by any stretch, but I am concerned that this is going to be another 12 months, so we need to see this material urgently. And I'd also just want to clarify with you, did you consider any conflict of interest issues? If the department has failed in some respects to address certain issues in relation to the 000 emergency service, how can the department investigate itself?
I'm not sure. The review is a review of regulation and legislation rather than an investigation.
Well, you call it potato, I call it potato, but you're reviewing or inquiring or investigating the current regulatory framework.
As opposed to the performance of entities.
Well, but inherently, if you've identified changes to the law that should have been implemented 2 years ago after the last significant outage, that may expose that the department hasn't done its job, and I'm just worried about potential conflicts of interest. Have you considered that at all?
I think, ultimately it will be a report that is provided to the Minister. If we receive submissions that indicate that there's a conflict that arises, we can deal with those as it comes up. But I think, as Mr McKay has outlined, this is a review of the settings as opposed to performance. And if something, makes sense to change in the settings, I think we would have no issue recommending that go forward, regardless of whether or not it should have been adopted at a different point in time.
Okay.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah. Thank you for your time. Appreciate your taking some questions on notice, and let's hope we get that ACMA report soon. Thank you. We are now going to suspend, and if we can isolate, please, Hansard. And I'm going to call for a private meeting, so we just need everyone to clear the room.